Our next guest is an Emmy and Academy Award-winning writer, producer, and director behind movies like Vice, The Big Short, and Anchorman. His podcast, Death at the Wing, How Drugs, Tragedy, and the Reagan Revolution Defined a Decade of Basketball, is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Please welcome back to the show, Adam McKay. How are you, Adam?
Mr. Myers, how are you, sir?
I'm doing very well. It's always nice to speak to you. We had the same job, different times. We were head writers at SNL. But I wanted to ask you about a different title you had, which you were the only person ever to have that title. I think you know what I'm talking about. Give us the backstory.
Yeah, so I was head writer at SNL for a couple years, had a wonderful time, very challenging job. And I kind of thought maybe it's time to move on. And, in a very friendly way. And my manager at the time, a guy by the name of Jimmy Miller, said, if you're going to quit, make an unreasonable demand. And I said, well, I really want to direct films, so I would love to have a budget to do short films. And I really don't like going to all these production meetings, so I don't want to go to the meetings, and I want a pay raise, and I want to name my own credit. And even Jimmy was like, that's a lot. And Lauren was like, okay, you got it. And so my credit for my last 2 years was coordinator of falconry. And if you look at it, they ran it towards the end of the credits.
Sure.
But a friend of mine got a frame grab of it that I have framed. But as far as I know, and we'd have to dig through the archives, I believe I'm the only coordinator of falconry the show has ever had. So anytime there were loose falcons that were going to fly in the studio,
Yeah.
Bring back prey to someone with that leather glove on, they called me. And now, unfortunately, that never happened in the 2 years. I never got that call.
Right.
But I was ready and trained, and I was ready to support SNL any way possible.
So this podcast is about basketball, specifically basketball in the 80s, and how it sort of intertwined the politics of that era with the excess of that era, and how for a lot of players in the league at the time, it had very tragic outcomes.
Yeah, it's a story that I've been tracking. I've been an NBA fan for decades. And through talking to my friends, we were always doing the what if game. We're like, what if Len Bias had played? What if Drazen Petrovic had played? And it was all these great talents that all died very young. Benji Wilson, Terry Furlow, Hank Gathers. It's an incredibly long list. And at a certain point, like 7, 8 years ago, I was like, wait a minute. Why did all these guys die in this period? I can't find this in any other sport. So the fun of, a podcast is you can kind of dive into it with the question intact. If you sold this as a TV series, you'd have to already answer the question. But I was lucky enough, I got these incredible producers, and we just dove in. And what ended up happening was it became this portrait of the 80s, of the explosion of the NBA, media, the Reagan Revolution, and all these kind of amazing stories of these players.
One of the things that I think people who are hyper aware of what professional athletes get paid today might be surprised to know is how many athletes of that era in the 70s and 80s had second jobs.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, you think of basketball as this giant sport, but in the 60s and 70s, it was like the seventh sport. It was like football, baseball, like even to some degree, bowling, boxing, hockey, college basketball. So Jerry West, we interviewed the great Jerry West, and he told me that he made $16,000 a year after he was drafted. He was like the number 2 draft pick. And I learned from Jackie McMullen, the great sports writer, that Bob Cousy was a driving instructor during the off season. And for people that don't know, Cousy was like a transformative point guard, Hall of Famer. And then Tommy Heinsohn, who was a forward for the Celtics, great teams, he was a waiter during the off season, but he would chain smoke. So he would come over to the table with the Caesar salad, and he would just reek of like Pall Malls. And so they had to boot Tommy Heinsohn. And it kind of went on and on. Bill Walton worked at the ASPCA. He was neutering animals. And all right, that's clearly made up, but the other ones are true.
Hey, one thing, as we talk about, legends of days gone by. So I'm coming up in Chicago as an improviser, sort of in the era right after you. And I would always hear tell it was of legendary status, the shows that you and your fellow improvisers at the time would do, not in theaters, but out on the streets of Chicago. Do you have any memories of the street shows you were doing as improvisers?
Yeah, it was the Upright Citizens Brigade, which was our mangy little group in Chicago. And it was Horatio Sands, it was Matt Besser, it was Ian Roberts, Amy Poehler joined us. We had Rich Fulcher, all these different people. And there was one show we did that was called the Conference on the Future of Happiness. And essentially, we were all these self-help gurus who had promised that at the end of the show that the fiction was every audience member had paid $5,000 to come to this conference. And we had one sentence that if you heard it, you would get eternal happiness. And at one point, my character stole the sentence and ran out into the streets, through the real streets of Chicago. And little did the audience know, my apartment was nearby, and it was a first-floor apartment. So they chased me to the apartment. I busted into it like it wasn't my apartment and proceeded to murder Horatio Sands, who was watching Matlock on his TV. And still had the sentence, and then came out the other end of the walkway, and there was a car waiting for us with bikini models on it, and it was playing Everything is Beautiful, blaring from the car, and all of us, Besser, Ian, Horatio, got on the car and said, "Do you want the sentence of happiness?" And the whole crowd yelled, "Yes." And we opened up a box, and it was full of dough. And then we whipped dough at the audience, called them a bunch of suckers, and I'll never forget the main critic from the Chicago Reader, which you remember, Seth. That was like one of the big places to get reviewed in.
Yes.
I think it was Jack Helbig was his name.
He was the guy.
And I hit him dead center right on his chest with a big hunk of dough. And then we drove away with the bikini models, leaving the audience like on some strange street, and just ending the show.
And how was Helbig's review?
It was mixed.
That's fair. That's fair. Hey, thank you. It's always great to see you, Adam. Death at the Wing is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.